Good evening. Our top story this week. The child protective industry in Florida has been caught sending kids to unlicensed religious group homes and unlicensed military children's homes, which are also collecting scholarship money, while the kids have reportedly been abused at nearly a dozen of these facilities, including one of these kids who identified as gay, thus being mocked by home staff, isolated from the rest of the kids, and sent to therapy where it was hoped he would be converted to heterosexuality, and state officials ignored his complaints of abuse, thus leaving him to the dogs. Also in Florida, a service group that helps the victims of prostitution has filed a federal lawsuit against two high-ranking DCF officials alleging a smear campaign against them, and the leader of a youth mentoring agency wants his Medicaid fraud charges dropped because he says prosecutors withheld information from a grand jury which might have shown he was innocent of any wrongdoing. In Arizona this week, the child protective industry is being told to be more vigilant after a foster parent was arrested for sexually abusing a kid in his care. In Maine, a new study claims that youth obesity will cost the state $1.2 billion over the next 20 years. In Winona County, Minnesota, the child protective industry is said to have adequately addressed abuse claims in only 37.5% of cases and failed to meet mandated response times in at least a third of them. In Nebraska, a hearing focuses on the problem of a high number of children leaving state care at the age of 19 without the adequate resources to help them thrive in the adult world. And in Nevada, the Supreme Court steps in to deal with a possible forced abortion case where a lower court wants to make a disabled woman abort her baby against the wishes of her legal guardians. In New York, 41 people are taking the state to court after being placed on the child abuse registry, all claiming that they were denied the chance to clear their names. In North Carolina, the Gaston County DSS, which is a few CPS agents who deal with foster families around due to complaints about some social workers from some foster parents, which pisses off some other foster parents who actually like the CPS agents they were working with, who now have to deal with the ones who the other ones didn't like. The congresswoman from California is pushing for a change in child labor laws after concerns are raised about children working in the fields. And according to a new study by the Department of Health and Human Services, 40.7% of all children born in the United States are born out of wedlock. In Germany this week, a judge orders the snatching of kids from the parents of homeschoolers due to the country's strict indoctrination laws. In Indonesia, pedophiles are using Facebook to target, kidnap, and traffic young girls. In India, on average, 2 babies are abandoned every day in Delhi, and if they are lucky enough to be found in time, they get placed in a low-quality children's home. And the drug companies are using India's poor as human guinea pigs by testing drugs on them without them even knowing it. In New Zealand, a couple of foster parents are on trial for abuse after allegedly scrubbing the bodies and teeth of foster children with a wire brush. There is another new agreement between Russia and the United States that they say will give better protections to Russian orphans adopted by American parents. But Russia is still mad about not being given access to a Russian child who was abused by his adoptive parents. In Australia, it turns out that the number of children in foster care has doubled over the last 10 years. Half of the Aboriginal foster kids in Australia do not live with their Indigenous caregivers, so they're risking disconnection from their culture and identities. And more than 4,000 children in Victoria have been made homeless because their families have been evicted from public housing. In Canada, the former residents of the Nova Scotia Home for Coloured Children are alleging child abuse, neglect, beatings, and sexual assault. In Ontario's Waterloo region, they're worried about not being able to mess with more families due to budget cuts and job losses. A family in Newfoundland is still trying to get answers to how and why their daughter died while in foster care a year later. And a judge in Alberta says he is challenging children's services to smarten up in order to prevent the death of more foster kids after a probe into the death of Samantha Martin. In England, foreign white children are being targeted by forced adoption because they are more likely to be adopted by white British families, while a protest rally is held in Horsham against the UK's forced adoption policy. A British foster couple gets stuck with a £59,000 bill after agreeing to upgrade their home so they could take in disabled foster kids. British foster kids are being booted out of care at the age of 16 into poor areas with no means of caring for themselves. Many adoptive parents are now having nervous breakdowns because social services isn't giving them adequate support to take care of the special needs kids who they adopted. A court rules that Catholic adoption agencies must do business with gay couples, and British social workers snatch a kid by having it deported back to England from Spain. In entertainment news this week, Gary Glitter is busted then released on bail by the investigators who are looking into the BBC star's Jimmy Savile's pedophile ring. Kris Jenner from Keeping Up up with the Kardashians is upset after somebody makes a false report against her to the child abuse hotline. After being booted off of Dancing with the Stars, Bristol Palin's making Levi Johnson's life a living hell over child support that he owes her. And it is now believed that the oldest son of the Octomom watched his mother's porno on his cell phone. In Pennsylvania, it has been decided that former foster parent and Penn State football coach Jerry Sandusky will serve his time in a maximum security prison, housing death row inmates in seclusion protective custody, as the state fears that he would be very vulnerable in a prison setting. And former Penn State President Graham Spanier is charged for perjury, obstruction of justice, and endangering the welfare of children for his part in the Jerry Sandusky case in what they're calling a conspiracy of silence. In Kentucky, a man is charged with sexually abusing foster kids. In Michigan, a foster father is found guilty of 8 sex crimes against foster kids. In Nevada, a family court judge is indicted and a federal warrant is issued in a $3 million fraud scheme. In Missouri, a foster parent is indicted on child abuse charges after she broke a 6-week-old baby's arm, then fractured the child's skull, causing a brain injury only 5 weeks later. A Florida woman was arrested for filing a false report with the child abuse hotline, and another idiot from Florida got arrested for calling up a local school principal and falsely reporting to her that he allegedly sexually abused his 3-year-old daughter. In Maine, a grandmother who was frustrated with CPS writes to the ripoff report that 3 CPS agents are ignoring proof and blaming the wrong person and wrongfully keeping the kid away from the family. In Minnesota, a retired family court judge has decided to make the issue of adequate legal representation for parents her retirement project so that so many kids don't end up stuck in the foster care system for the rest of their childhoods when they don't need to be. In Florida, a boy is being kept in limbo from his family by CPS agents in an effort to get the parents to admit to killing their 4-year-old daughter who had died from medical conditions, and he is also not allowed to visit with his parents as they're keeping him as a potential witness in the case. And finally, tonight in New Mexico, a lawsuit alleges that a cop used a stun gun on a 10-year-old boy during career day at school after the kid refused to wash the officer's car. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.